Hello everyone, Eric with OzoneTCG, and we are back. It's been a little while, been busy with work, a lot's been going on, been working consistently 50 or 60 hours per week, last about 3 weeks now, but we are back with some Yu-Gi-Oh news, one that I did not expect to make so soon. Of course, you guys have probably seen already, there is a new Yu-Gi-Oh ban list out, effective December 1st. As of recording, it is November 21st, 2022. The Dark World Structure deck is coming out this week. I guess technically it releases today or something. And it is a really interesting day for the game. Probably the most interesting day in the history of Yu-Gi-Oh! For this year. I think this is one of the most, I guess, counterintuitive ban lists that came out. We're going to go ahead and talk about this in two parts, or really three parts. The list itself, what's going to happen over the next couple of months, and a trend that I think is really interesting and kind of worrying in some regards, with some other news we received over the weekend regarding the game and some printing. We're going to go ahead and talk about those. Of course, you guys haven't seen it already. Mystic Mine is finally gone, and Curious Lightsword Dominion. People were confused about this originally. Curious is for a Dark World FTK that exists with the new cards. I don't think it's very good, but I guess it's a preemptive hit. Also, Curious is just one of the craziest Link 3s ever printed. Definitely should not have existed. I'm sad to see it go. I love the card, but it definitely is not a healthy card for the game. What is also not healthy, and I'm glad to see go, though, is, of course, Mystic Mine. I have never thought this card was a good card for the health of the metagame. I'm glad to see that it is finally gone. That's all that's actually banned in this case, but these are good hits, especially Mystic Mine. Should have happened earlier, but I'm glad it's finally happened. Limited actually doesn't really matter too much. It's Herald of the Orange Light. Just was reprinted recently in Tournament Pack 20 as a super rare. Some of us purchased our 3 for a Shizu tier limit. Some people play it. I played it, for example. I don't think it's really necessary, but it's limited now, so it's going to be a little bit more difficult to negate those shifters and negate dwellers in the mirror. I don't really like that it's limited, but some lists opted to not even play it at all. It's probably fine, honestly. Kind of a proxy hit in that regard. And then to 2, Lyrilusc Recital Starling. I did not expect this. This card is not a very healthy card to keep at more than one. This is going to enable a lot of things. So in case you haven't seen Yassine's video, he actually makes, I think, Ptolemaeus, Stellar Knight Ptolemaeus, which, spoiler, it's at 3 now. Ptolemaeus with a bunch of materials using a 2-card combo with Lyrilusc, because we have the 2 Recital Starling now. That is worrying. I'll probably end up making some kind of Sprite or just a Lyrilusc Tri-Brigade deck profile later on this week regarding this, because this is big. It's really difficult to see right now unless you've seen a lot of the combos that can happen because of the new unlimits. But the deck gets much more consistent. You guys will see in just a second. Of course, the unlimits. Number 1, Stellar Knight Ptolemaeus. This card has been banned since 2016. It is one of my favorite XCs ever. Yeah, I absolutely love it. It is a merged form of my favorite card ever printed, Denglong First the Yangzing. This is its final evolution form in the lore, but we have this card at 3, went from 0 to 3, which does not happen often. It's a rare occurrence for a card to go from 0, especially for how long it's been banned, directly to 3. Doesn't happen too often. Glad to see this card back. This is going to be a problematic card in the format, I guarantee it. Beyond just Stellar Knight, Constellar Diamond being a hell of a card to play against in the mirror, along with Abyss Dweller, we are going to see a lot of decks trying to play this, especially the decks like Lunalight. Lunalight tier limit is a deck. It's a little bit better now because of Fire Formation Tenki that also goes into the Tri-Brigade decks that can play Lyrilusc and Tri-Brigade and Lunalight. Those are mostly the main 2 decks. Don't know if Sprite is going to be playing the triple Tenki, but I know Tri-Brigade will. I think those become 2 very distinctly different variants of the deck now. Main ones, Metaverse, of course, Mystic Mine's gone, so this card is no longer a problem at all. Most field spells suck unless they are able to add a card upon resolution of their initial activation. Trickstar Light Stage Primeval Planet Perloreno, etc. This card's fine. Again, now that mine is gone, it's not an issue whatsoever. Main two cards that are not fine, however, and that are definitely not healthy for the metagame, or the game in general, Dimensional Fissure and Macrocosmos. I'm not going to get into the rulings with Macrocosmos, for example. There's a couple debatable interactions with it. But the fact that D-Fissure and Macrocosmos are at 3 now, they are no longer sacky one-ofs. Especially D-Fissure, this card is really, really good now. And decks that can take advantage of it, Fluwandereeze, for example, they were already maining it, or at least siding it, just in the past format at 1. It's going to be more of an issue now. It protects your board from getting Hovnist more often than not. Works in combination with Shifter, in that you discard Shifter, activate D-Fissure, they probably can't play if they're playing Tearlament, for example. Not a good trend, though. These two Unlimits were actually the cards that really hurt Dark World. Dark World cards have to be discarded to the graveyard by a card effect if they're not discarded specifically to the graveyard. Unlike Dangers, they do not get their card effects. This hurts them. This is the counterintuitive hit I mentioned previously. It doesn't really make sense for them to bring these cards out besides just the metagame right now. So that's the basic overview of the list. However, there are a couple things we have to talk about regarding this list. So first of all, we weren't supposed to get a new list for a couple of months. It specifically said, as it usually does, the next update for the list will be no sooner than a couple of months, something along those lines, but a few months. It hasn't been a few months, right? And you could argue, well, they don't literally mean a few months, but and you may be right in that case. However, I think that Konami should be sticking to that a little bit more closely. It's been about a month and a half, a month and, say, 20 days-ish. So not exactly a couple months. And it's hard to really trust Konami at this point. The reason being is that they have consistently not stuck to what they say the next update will be no sooner than X date. When we receive those, now it's just even more vague. There's no consistency in when lists are being released, and honestly, there's just no transparency with it at all. We are often kept in the dark now. Magic has done a lot of shading things recently, if you guys haven't heard any of the news, but what they have done consistently is that we know that there's going to be a list sometime around set releases. It's pretty consistent, and there's a good enough pattern to see when ban lists in, say, Standard, Pioneer, Modern are going to occur. Same with Pokemon. Every single set releases, Silver Tempest most recently released in the Pokemon TCG. We know that there's going to be some kind of ban list update. Often there is no update in general, but we know we are going to at least hear that there is no update at all. With Yu-Gi-Oh, however, Konami does not like to keep us informed whatsoever now. It's kind of a worrying thing, and it's happened for the last couple of years. Ever since they got rid of exact ban list dates a couple of years ago, it's been really difficult to know when you should sell cards, when you should not play a certain format. You'll know how long it is normally. That's how it always was until a couple of years ago. Now they can release a list whenever they want, and in this case, it's been less than 2 months. I understand that top cut representation was a big issue recently. We've had 70+% or higher representation top cut at a couple of the most recent events. However, I don't think that necessarily means that you should just break that. Unfortunately, a lot of players whine about these things that, I don't want to play, a tier 0 format. I don't want Tearlament or Shizu to be the best deck. I don't want to play a game when it's like that. However, I think that every so often a tier 0 format like this is fine. Generally, we have them every 2 to 3 years. And it really hasn't happened for a lot of players who started during COVID in 2020. They missed the previous Tier 0 format of Sky Striker Orcus in late 2019. That was the last time we had a really, truly Tier 0 format, I think. But now we have one, and players are seeing, I don't really like this. And it's fine if you don't like it. But I don't think that doesn't mean it shouldn't exist in this case. I think overall, in my opinion, is different from most people in that a lot of people don't like them, but I think tier 0 formats where it's mostly mirrors, if the mirror is skillful enough, then it's probably fine. I think the only aspect of the current mirror match with Ishizu Tearlament is Dweller, and Dweller probably should have been hit as well. Same thing with like Instant Fusion. I would have actually liked to see those in this regard, but honestly, I don't think that it's it's a fine list for what it is. A lot more positives than negatives, I think. But the negatives are really bad with Defisher and Macro mostly. And this is kind of to push Kashtira Photon Hypernova in, I think, late January, early February, something like that. It's also very clear to push those. But yeah, so that's kind of where I stand about Konami with the communication. They don't do a very good job, unfortunately. I wish they would, and honestly, players, I think we should try and push them a little bit more to do better in the card games. Most other card games have some kind of, news source that's reliable. It's an issue in Yu-Gi-Oh! I wish Konami would do a lot better than they have been. It's been getting better with communication, but they need to step up their game quicker rather than dragging out over the course of the past couple of years. We barely get streams anymore, and that's one of the best ways to cover trading cards, especially if you want to cover paper trading card games. There's just a lot that doesn't happen that needs to happen in Yu-Gi-Oh! Trading card game. That brings us to the last point. We learned over the weekend that Power of the Elements is getting an unlimited run. So this is contrary to what happened in 2020. Eternity Code was the first set in basically ever that didn't have an unlimited print run. That does not happen often. That broke the trend for the game. But now we're breaking the trend again for seemingly no reason. I'm not sure if it was because numbers were down, sales numbers were down, even though that player attendance is actually up in European regions. Maybe because they're down in North American regions. I'm not sure the exact reason. My guess is that players were complaining a lot about the current format, the ones who play competitively, and for some reason they want to inject more product into the market. Doesn't really make sense because right now with economic situations and most trading card games are cutting production on a lot of sets to inject more cards, brings down the value of a lot of cards that had some kind of value. Perla Reno, Sprite Blue, for example, those were pretty valuable cards. Some reaching well over $100. Perla Reno at one point was like $110, $120 card per copy. It's been dropping since then, and it has dropped quite a bit because of this unlimited run kind of leak from one of the big distributors. Won't say which ones, but if you guys look for the information, you'll find it. They don't leak product often either. Again, it's really uncommon for us to see kind of trends just breaking randomly, and I'm not really sure why they're doing it. The other trend that they have is a little bit of history for those who joined in 2020. Starlights are when we had unlimited products. So starting with Rising Rampage, 2019, August of 2019, Rising Rampage introduced the Starlight rarity. At the time, it had no name, anything like that. We just knew it was a really rare and hard to get rarity, maybe 1 per 2 to 4 cases, something like that. They weren't present in the unlimited runs. We still had unlimited runs then, but you could only get Starlight rares in the first edition sets. That is no longer the case. Apparently, you can get Starlight rares that are unlimited in this unlimited Power of the Elements run. I don't know why they chose this at all, and this is, again, part of the transparency. There seems to be no really good reason for them to do that. It'll probably not have the first edition print stamp on there that denotes that it's a first edition card. So there will be a first edition Starlight Rare and unlimited edition Starlight Rare, and that kind of goes contrary to what Starlight Rare is supposed to be. It is supposed to be an expensive card. It's supposed to be a high rarity card that a lot of collectors seek to collect, but having an unlimited version of this kind of goes against all of that. Now, there were unlimited versions of Ultimate Rares back in like Duelist Alliance, Cross Souls format. All of those, they have those, but those weren't nearly as difficult to get as Starlight Rares. Starlight Rares are much more difficult to obtain, to pull from cases and other sealed product. In this case, Starlight Rare, though, kind of doesn't make too much sense to have those, and they really are going to diminish the value of a lot of the Starlight Rares that are in Power of the Elements because of this unlimited run. Why they're doing it, I think they just want to have those short-term money gains. And unfortunately, that's how Konami has been in the past. They have a trend of doing that. They have sacrificed a lot of long-term potential, investing into a media company, creating their own media company for streaming in North America, and even in the Canadian region, just covering news with products and everything, having a better social media team. They've really neglected to invest into the own company, and they'd rather just have that steady income coming in, at least for the short term. That's worrying for a company like Konami, and Konami has a pretty okay history with the Yu-Gi-Oh! Trading card game. A lot of controversy with it, but it's really hard to see that the game's being mismanaged in that regard, that the company doesn't even care to invest in itself to keep the game continuing. Who knows how long Yu-Gi-Oh! Will be around. I don't think it's going to go away anytime soon, but I also don't see it lasting probably even as long as Magic has, simply because of Konami's ridiculous decisions that they've had in the past. It's kind of where I stand on it. Keep a lookout for those Starlit Rare prices. It's going to be interesting to see what they look like over the next couple months. Some regions didn't even receive Power of the Elements until October, which is also just ridiculous. That's a distributor issue, and Konami selling boxes to distributors, that's just another failing on their end. I don't know what happened logistically. COVID's not really an issue with that anymore. But they just absolutely dropped the ball on that. They probably, again, maybe didn't invest in the infrastructure properly. Not really sure, but this ban list tells us a lot. It was I think I enjoyed this surprise list, more so about its implications for the whole of Yu-Gi-Oh! Rather than about the actual metagame itself. We're probably going to have more discussions about this moving forward. It's a really interesting discussion. We'll just have to talk about it more. If you guys enjoy the video, be sure to share it, and we will see you in the next one. Thank you as always for watching.